Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brie Masselli, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. Enhance authentic and meaningful youth engagement using the Y-VAL. You will notice on your screen a screenshot of an example of the GoToWebinar interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop in the upper right corner. You are listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Be sure to use your unique PIN. To the right of the GoToWebinar PowerPoint viewer is the GoToWebinar control panel. This is where you have the option to select the way you hear the webinar. Raise your hand and ask questions by text. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions on today's presenters by typing your questions into the Questions for Staff pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect this and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We also have the slides in PDF available to you and 3 handouts that you can download at any time. Josie?
Okay, thank you so much, Miriam, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Josie Badger, and I am the co-director of the National RAISE Center along with Peg Kinsell. And we here at RAISE work to provide technical assistance to parent centers, youth with disabilities, and families on transition, ultimately improving employment, education, and independent living outcomes. Over the past few years, a major focus of interest has been youth development and youth engagement. And so I was privileged enough to hear a webinar a few months ago that was hosted by Youth Move, who you will be hearing from very briefly. I was very impressed with the work that they're doing to empower the youth voice. And so you will be hearing from Brie and Alice here shortly, and I'm really excited for your response and questions as we move through this webinar. Please be aware that many of us who are presenting are in snowstorms, and so hopefully there are no additional technical problems, but please give us your grace. So thank you, Brie and Alice, and I want to turn it over to you. Go ahead, Miriam.
Thanks, Josie.
Great.
So before we get started,
go ahead, Alice.
Sorry, thanks for getting us started. Before we officially start, we'd just like to start by acknowledging some of the partners and funders that allowed for the development of the Y-VAL assessment tool research and development. And those include Portland State University, SAMHSA, the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, and the Regional Research Institute. Next slide, please. I'll just introduce myself quick. My name is Alice Topaloff. I'm the Operations Coordinator at Youth Move National. In this role, I do a lot of behind-the-scenes work, which includes general day-to-day operations, our internal continuous quality improvement strategy, and data analysis for several research and evaluation projects we work on. This includes data analysis for agencies who partner with us to implement the Y-VAL tool at their agency or organization. And I'll pass it over to Brie to introduce herself.
Thank you, Alice. So I'm Brie Masselli. I'm the Youth Program Director at Youth Move National, and I oversee our youth network and the technical assistance offerings that we provide to our youth network, as well as our systems partners within child welfare, juvenile justice. We work both at the local community level as well as the national level, and I oversee a lot of our program staff that do probably very similar work and very similar technical assistance in a little bit of a different mental health realm that the RAISE Center does for you all as parent centers. So we're excited to be here. And I'll turn it back to Alice.
So Youth Move National is a youth-driven chapter membership organization dedicated to improving services and systems that serve youth, such as mental health, juvenile justice, education, and child welfare. MOVE, M-O-V-E, stands for Motivating Others Through Voices of Experience. Members share their voices of experience through advocacy and leadership activities to change the very systems they have lived through. We are a chapter-based organization with over 65 chapters nationwide spread across the 33 states. Next slide, please. So here's what we're going to go over during today's webinar. We're going to do a quick overview of the value of youth-driven care and the value of young adult participation in advising and decision-making at the organizational level. And then we'll go over the need for an assessment tool that would help agencies and organizations assess best practices for youth engagement. We'll briefly talk about how the Y-VAL tool was developed. Then we'll go over the 8 domains that make up the youth and young adult voice at the agency level, the Y-VAL. And finally, we'll talk about the process of implementing the Y-VAL assessment tool and shape package at your own agency. Next slide, please. And Brie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So at Youth Move National, we really pride ourselves on being a national youth-driven organization. And one of our cornerstones is really making sure that youth are at the table when it comes to their treatment and their care, no matter the system or service that they're receiving. Research shows that patients, youth, and families who actively engage with their healthcare teams have better outcomes. They often choose less expensive options when participating in a shared decision-making process. And they often are more satisfied with the services that they receive. And so it is really important for us at Youth Move National that we create and empower young people to understand their lived experience, be able to apply that to systems change efforts, and be prepared to sit and engage in either treatment level conversations, systems conversations on really how to share their lived experience in a way that improves quality of care for all. The Center for Advancing Health report really talks about healthcare leaders, really leadership culture. We're oftentimes working in very complex systems where leaders don't always see the value added of having youth and families at the table. And the healthcare report is a great resource that we're often kind of going back to as a foundational document that really outlines engagement. It's an active process. It's ongoing. The healthcare system doesn't make engagement easy. We know it's complex. So the only way to try to collaboratively work together is to have both perspectives at the table. Everyone benefits from engagement: the youth, the family, the individual, the treatment provider, the overall system. And engagement is demanding. And many organizations and systems are unprepared with what it could look like and what it takes to do well. The only way we can all be successful with youth voice at the table and improving these healthcare systems is if true partnership is required, which means sometimes family members, adults, and systems leaders really need to understand that even though a young person, based on either age or developmental disability, that they still have a voice that still matters within their treatment. And here at Youth Move National, we continue to strive to make understanding that process easier. Next slide. So youth-driven care is very much part of our mental health lens. So for some of you, you might be very familiar with a family-driven approach. Youth-driven care is a definition that Youth Move National, in partnership with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, came up with. It's a little bit of a spin off of a person-centered approach, but really kind of pushes the why we do the work that we do. So We believe that young people have the right to be empowered and educated, but they're given a decision-making role in the care of their own lives, as well as the policies and procedures that govern that care for all youth and the community, the state, and the nation. This approach requires that we give young people a sustainable voice, that we listen to the youth, that youth organizations are accessible and create safe environments that allow for sustainability in accordance to the culture and the beliefs in which youth identify. A youth-guided approach recognizes in these complex systems that we work in, just by being young, there is an inherent power dynamic that happens, and that power within healthcare decisions needs to be shared, and we understand that young people may need to participate, learn more about their story in order to participate fully within a strength-based and a change process. Next slide. So Hart's ladder you may have seen a similar graphic to this, which really kind of looks at levels of participation for young people. This is one that's been adapted to really look at equity within programming. And so at the very bottom, you see manipulation, decoration, and tokenism. Oftentimes when we think of youth engagement, that's often where we sit. We sit there because there's all of these cultural beliefs that young people are seen but don't speak, that parents know best, adults know best, that there's this inherent that young people have not experienced enough to then contribute enough, which often changes within the very dynamic of the question we're asking young people to participate in. So sometimes we see manipulation where adults want to participate with youth, but they kind of sell them on an idea, and then they say, oh, well, I think you should come with me to this event, but they don't really explain to the youth what the event is. They bring them there in a kind of a not very transparent approach, or decoration. We often see sometimes that parents are actively participating, and sometimes they bring their children along for the event, but it's not as meaningful for the young people because they don't necessarily understand why they're there. So sometimes it feels like decoration or tokenism, that I'm here to check a box as a youth or at the table, but no one ever engages with me in conversation. No one asks my opinion. I don't feel prepared to be here. And so often that results in a lack of engagement. That's when young people were like, I went to that and it wasn't fun. It didn't make sense to me, so I'm not going back, because they haven't been prepared enough. So if you move up the ladder, you start to see that there's more opportunities for youth to be educated, empowered, and informed. And as they gain a clearer understanding of what it is that they are being asked to participate in, they are more informed, they are more prepared to utilize their personal experience to contribute to conversation. Youth serving as consultants, oftentimes adults go to youth and ask for their perception of like, how is this working? How is this not working? Youth gives their responses, but they never know what happens with their responses. Did that ever really change policy? I remember going to a focus group, sharing all my satisfaction or dissatisfaction with a particular system, but no one ever told me what happened with that information. That's really more of a consultation approach. When we think of youth adult partnership, it really is that full scope of working collectively together. They contribute to the conversation. They see the end results of their contribution. And as you move up the realm, you really start to see that youth are starting to initiate their own ideas. They're starting to develop their own action plans to implement what is most important to them. And they're starting to create their own type of programming that meets the needs of young adults in their community versus meeting the needs of what adults think youth need. We often hear that all the time. Adults create an event and they're like, why the young people don't show up? Why weren't they here? And it's because you created something that you think they needed versus actually hearing from them and being informed. The next slide. So, benefits of authentic youth engagement. Youth and young adult voice really can contribute to the design and implementation of new policies. It changes institutional culture and practice. It can build awareness and a common understanding. It builds a sense of community for the young people. It helps improve their own self-efficacy, and it improves individual and organizational outcomes. What is most important about the benefits is that when a youth and young adult is involved within the system, they have a first-hand experience. And oftentimes, their perception, their reality is different than the story and the perception that a family might experience. And so when we're able to take the young person's experience, partner that with the parent experience, and present that back to a service provider and or a professional, we are more likely to have a stronger outcome at the end, and the benefit is greater. I often use the example, it happens quite a bit in our mental health world, that transportation to appointments is very, very hard. For some young adults with mental health diagnosis or co-occurring, getting transportation to get to their events is sometimes covered by their health insurance, oftentimes not, depending level of severity. And so oftentimes that policy in itself, in the mental health world, this isn't often in the physical health world, but in the mental health world, you miss 3 appointments, you're no longer able to receive services at that agency. They have this 3-strike rule. Well, that does not make sense for youth and families. They should never be excluded from access to care because they've missed too many appointments. And transportation is often a barrier for a lot of families. And if the parent is working, then the child can't get to a session. And so just having all of that perspective together can show how an organization would be able to see those benefits. Shifting that policy, hearing that perspective, shifting a policy so that we remove kind of these 3 strikes, you're out. It shifts the culture, it improves the practice. The agency might not have understood like what barriers there are for youth and families. And so it really creates a really rich dialogue that really helps both the individual family and youth, but also makes the agency more accessible. And I think everyone wins in that perspective. So a lot of this is very similar to family engagement. I think we just have to take a different lens to it, that each individual person has their own worldview of their services and their supports and what they need, and that we have to be able to listen to all of that to then create an appropriate engagement strategy. So with that being said, I'm going to pause a little bit and see if anyone on the line has any questions.
I don't see any questions, not so far, so I think you can continue.
Great. So then I will hand it back over to the next slide, and I'll hand it back to Alice.
Thanks, Brie. So thanks for all this background and kind of contextual information, right? So now we're going to go a little bit into what is the Y-VAL. So the Y-VAL provides a framework of key indicators of meaningful and successful youth and young adult voice and program design at the agency level. So we've talked about the value of youth voice and the benefits of youth engagement. Assessing those allows for a collective and reflective process to better understand where the agency is at with youth and young adult engagement. This assessment also allows organizations to, first of all, promote a shared vision for success, then identify strengths and needs of the agency, and it also supports agencies with moving towards sustainable engagement. This assessment requires the young people at an agency to participate and helps young people advocate for meaningful participation and support that will benefit them. Finally, taking this tool in a pre- and post-intervention way, such as like after a technical assistance intervention, after a policy was implemented, after a strategic planning session was hosted. It also helps assess the impact of such an intervention on the agency. Next slide, please. So just a quick word about how the Y-VAL was developed. As mentioned previously, the Y-VAL was developed in full partnership with Portland State University. It started with a review of existing assessment tools that looked at how youth voice was engaged in organizational programming. The team brought this for review to Youth Move National's Youth Best Practice Committee. The Youth Best Practice Committee is a group of young people that gathers monthly via phone and annually in person, and that works a lot in between each of these meetings. They use their personal experience and voices to define what quality youth-driven partnerships look like, as well as key outcomes for individuals, organizations, and systems who serve youth and implement youth programming. The Youth Best Practice Committee advises the field on the development and application of best practice approaches for engaging youth in systems transformation through meaningful planning, design, implementation, and evaluation of the programs that serve them. So the Youth Best Practice Committee worked on this tool a couple years ago, reviewed it thoroughly, provided input and several rounds of edits to really make the tool youth-driven and youth-friendly. Finally, last year we conducted a national validation study. I believe a journal article going over the validation study was shared with participants, but it's also available for download here, and it will definitely be, we'll make sure it's included with the follow-up notes. Next slide, please. So the Y-VAL tool is split into 8 domains or themes. Each domain has several statements about the agency. We'll call those items. These statements are specific examples, strategies, or aspects that may or may not be in place at an agency. Participants are asked to score the level of implementation of that strategy at their agency, and we'll go over a couple of examples in a minute. So the 8 themes are, the first domain is overall vision and commitments. So things that have to do with the agency having developed formal structures and policies for youth voice and participation. The second domain is around collaborative approach. Are young people treated as valued partners in decision-making processes? The third domain is empowered representatives. Young people are supported in a way that will maximize their potential to have an impact on decisions. The fourth domain is commitment to facilitation and support of youth and young adult participation. This goes to how the agency invests resources to support participation. The fifth domain is workforce development. Does the agency ensure that all staff are able to interact collaboratively with young people? Do they offer that support? The sixth domain is participation in developing programming and program policies. So do young people have an impact on how the program works with the population? The seventh domain is participation in evaluation. Are young people engaged in efforts to determine how well the agency is doing its work? And finally, the last domain, the eighth domain, is leading initiatives and projects. Does the agency support young people to take the lead on projects that they design? So for the next half of this session, we'll go over 1 item per domain to give you a sense of what the assessment tool feels like and gets to. There are a few questions that we will be asking for your participation on, and we'll see how that poll works. Next slide, please. So for each item, we ask participants to rank the score from 1 to 5, 1 being this policy or strategy is least developed at the agency, and 5 being this policy is fully developed. The participant can also select not applicable if that policy or strategy does not apply or if they don't know about this at their agency. Next slide, please. And Brie, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you. So our first domain is overall vision and commitment, and this is just a little bit to show you more about what that formal policy is, one aspect of showing that you are committed to youth engagement. And so these are some things that on that score of like 1 to 5, you would select, does my agency do all of these or some of these? So does the agency have a formal policy that describes why and how it involves young people in advising and decision making? The policy would describe the types of decision making and advising that a youth and young adult would participate in. describes the level in which the youth and young adult have decision-making power. They will have, for example, what parts of the program are they fully able to say yes or no versus what are they just advising on, or they're contributing to a larger decision-making body. Young people collaborated in the developing of this policy, and it's periodically updated and reflects new circumstances. The policy is written in language that young people find easy to understand. And so what this domain is really looking to do is most agencies, when they don't have a very clear youth program aspects, you would look to say, do we have a youth advisory committee? And does that youth advisory committee have decision making where, what types of decisions are they involved in? Maybe you don't have an advising committee, but maybe you have an overarching governance body and young people participate at that level. And so you'd want to think within your organization where you are with your overall vision and commitment for youth and young adult voice within your agency. And I believe we will be moving to a poll. I think we're just waiting for the poll to be set up.
The poll is now, or the next slide?
The next slide. Sorry, I should have said next slide. So here is the domain. The agency has a formal policy. We're asking you guys to participate. Thinking of the scale, 1, least developed. We currently don't have a policy that talks about how we engage young people in advising and decision making, or fully developed. And the poll should pop up. Okay.
So the first poll is about the overall vision and commitment. The agency has a formal policy that describes why and how it involves young people. And you would vote 1 is least developed, so not at all, or very little. 2, midway. 3, fully developed, or does not apply, or I do not know about this. And we have about just under 40, all right, 40% have voted. I will give a few more, about 10 more seconds. 55% have voted. Okay, I'm going to close that. And we can see the results. The majority are least developed or midway developed.
Great, thank you. So this poll, one of the things that's really, you guys are basically completing one of the elements within this online assessment tool that we would ask local agencies to do. I think it's important for us to consider in your process of being least developed is important, and then also thinking about other aspects within that commitment domain that might help you get closer to being developed over time. And so with that, we can move to the next slide, which I believe Alice will go over.
Great, thank you. So the second domain is around collaborative approach, and one of the items in that domain is about youth and young adult friendly meetings. So what this might look like is the agency has worked with young people to establish good meeting practices that encourage young people to engage in meeting activities. Good meeting practices include providing meeting materials in advance, keeping meetings short and efficient, beginning with icebreakers or sharing time, explaining acronyms and jargon, and providing food and taking regular breaks. It might also be that meetings are scheduled at times and locations that youth and young adults can attend. As Brie mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, transportation is an issue, and just maximizing the ability for youth and young adults to attend meetings that we want them to participate in is a key to true youth engagement. And I don't think there's a poll on this one, so we can move to the next slide.
Okay. So the next domain is empowered representatives. So appropriate representation of young people who are part of the agency's decision-making, have received or are receiving services. They have similar lived experience to the young people that the agency serves. This is often, when we think of empowerment for young people, there is an element of learning skill and then being empowered enough to apply that skill. That is the premise of being empowered, is that you now have tools and you're able to implement them. Appropriate representation falls under empowerment because we've often seen organizations kind of, you think of that Hearts ladder again, they're down at the decoration, the manipulation, and they may have what they consider youth voice at the table, but maybe they're making decisions about child welfare, but yet the youth at the table has never been involved in child welfare. So that youth and young adult perspective does not represent the whole. And we really want to make sure that the group is diverse and that you have the appropriate representation to advise you in what you're seeking feedback on. So if you are a mental health agency and you have a youth advisory group, but none of the young people have actually accessed mental health services, then it's hard for them to really understand how their voice can contribute to change. And so just really thinking about that, and sometimes that means that you're selective in your participation if you have multiple opportunities for young people to sit on committees and councils and make decisions. We can move to the next slide.
Great, thank you. So this is the fourth domain, and we're going to go back to a poll for this one. So the fourth domain is commitment to facilitation and support of youth and young adult participation. And one of the themes in that domain is around dedicated staff time. So does the agency have dedicated staff time to support youth and young adult participation? This might look like the agency employs someone to help support the youth to participate in advising and decision-making, and that this person is either a youth or young adult with lived experience or someone with relevant expertise that is selected by the youth and young adults. If the agency does not have a staff member who does this, then the agency contracts with a youth and young adult run organization to support the youth participation. Or that the youth have significant input in selecting the person for this role and may prioritize demonstrated skills in supporting youth participation over lived experience. I think there's going to be a poll for this one. If we could move to the next slide. So the poll is going to be, does the agency employ someone to support youth and young adults to participate in advising and decision making? 1 being the least developed and 5 being fully developed. And not only does this person exist, but was this person hired by youth and or with youth guidance?
Okay. We've got 50% voted. I'll wait a few more seconds. Okay, let me close the poll. This one has much more fully developed in this poll. Great.
And back to Brie.
The next domain is workforce development, which is staff training. So staff receive orientation and training that clearly communicates the agency's respect for young people and commitment to empowering young people in decision making. So it becomes part of the culture of the organization, and all staff receive training about the value added of youth voice. Staff orientation and training describes the agency's policy around facilitating and supporting young adult voice. So if you're within an agency and a question is asked, all staff should be able to answer the question on how a young person can get involved. There might be an identified staff person who might officially engage them in the process, but it just allows for a workplace culture that all staff feel informed and see the value added of their voice. Young adults are involved in the developing and delivering this aspect of staff orientation. So sometimes young adults come in and do a presentation. Sometimes it's a recorded webinar about the value added of youth voice. Maybe it incorporates some strategic sharing opportunities of like success stories of young adults being recipients of service and advising and helping out the organization. There's a lot of ways to engage youth in it without having to like physically necessarily have them at every single staff orientation, especially because many of us work in small nonprofits, so it's not like we're hiring 20 people at the same time and orienting them all at the same time. All staff are provided professional development focused on supporting youth and young adult voice, collaboration with young people, empowerment, and positive youth and young adult development approaches. We often see a lot within the service systems we work in. Agencies are trained in strengths-based language, but that doesn't always mean how to engage a young person into a conversation or share decision-making techniques in ways that really help a young person feel that they're a mutual partner within their decision-making within care. Oftentimes young people are going into services and supports with limited voice within that process. So that's a little bit about workforce development. And next slide. So here is a poll. Staff orientation and training clearly communicates the agency's respect for young people's perspectives and a commitment to empowering youth and young adult participation in decision making. So we'll let the poll pop up.
Okay, let me. Okay, in this group, the majority have not got this developed yet. And then midway, 27%. So, great.
All right, and we'll go to the next slide. And this is you, Alex.
Domain. Yes, thanks, Brie. So the sixth domain is around participation. Are youth and young adults participating in developing programming and program policies? And one of the themes there is respect of youth and young adult culture. This is personally one of my favorite things because we hear a lot from young people who work at agencies that they were hired because of their lived experience and their experience in professional development. But that despite all that and despite them having access to resources and them being supported, they don't feel like there's a general respect for youth and young adult culture. So what this might look like is that young people have significant input in efforts to ensure that the agency climate, environment, and policies reflect youth and young adult culture and preferences. These efforts may include young adult involvement in, for example, social media and communication policy and management, aspect of the physical environment, policies around youth privacy and confidentiality, and developing opportunities for youth engagement and informal peer support. So not only does this go to respect of the youth who's working at the agency, but also respecting the youth and the culture of the people who might be benefiting from the services provided by the agency. Next slide, please.
So participation and evaluation is looking at feedback on services. The agency regularly gathers confidential feedback from young adults receiving services to ensure that the program is meeting their needs. Young people do not experience negative consequences as a result of giving honest feedback. So this is just one section within, there's other aspects within this domain. It's really important that not only do we hear their voice, but we're frequently checking in. And so depending on the organization that completes the assessment, this might come in the form of satisfaction surveys. We know that that's often service systems, that's what they do, is like, here's the comment box, here's the satisfaction survey, please complete it. The struggle is that depending how that is done, sometimes youth feel negative repercussions of their honesty. If it is often sometimes like, oh, here, complete this and put it in this stamped, this envelope and I'll mail it for you. Well, who knows if they ever open that envelope again. And so really making sure that we do hear their feedback, that we're utilizing their feedback to make improvement, that something happens with that, and that we do it in a way that does not disrupt their care in any way or the relationships in which they have with the organization and or provider. Next slide.
Great. So this is our final domain, the 8th domain, leading initiatives and projects. And this is also going to be a poll, the final poll. And one of the themes in that domain is the control of funds, which is a very practical and tangible way of measuring youth engagement, right? So what this might look like is, are youth leaders in control, or do they co-control funds that they raise or co-raise? And is there transparency about how these funds are distributed and used? For example, do the youth understand that the cost of hosting a fundraising event may be deducted from the amount of funds that they raised? And that kind of stuff. So one of the data points that we have for youth-run organizations is that we have annual chapter reports. So our chapters report to us annually around a whole bunch of questions, and one of them is around funding and whether or not they have access to the funds that they raise, or whether or not they have access to the budget and understand how the budget for their chapter is managed. So that's a really practical way of measuring youth engagement. And I think there's a poll next.
Next slide.
So control of funds. Do youth and young adult leaders control or co-control funds they raise or co-raise?
All right, so this one is read a little bit differently, saying the young people who are a part of the agency's decision making have similar lived experience to the people they serve. We have almost 50%. We're getting some does not apply or don't know on this one. Wait, do about 5 more seconds. All right, and I'm closing. So this one's mixed.
Great. So this is kind of an overview of the 8 domains and some of the questions that might be asked through the assessment. So now we'll go over quickly how you can implement the Y-VAL at your agency, and then we'll spend a little time on questions if there are any. So to formally implement the Y-VAL at your agency, to implement the whole package, we ask that at least 15 people per agency take the survey. That allows for a little bit of anonymity and better feedback. We ask that it's a mix of youth and young adult participants and adult participants, because sometimes we'll notice that youth might answer one way and adults might answer another way. So the way it works is that we'll work with one point person at the agency who will be sent a specific survey link, and then that person will share the link with whoever at their agency thinks should be taking the survey. Youth Move National will help with sending reminders, track participations, etc. And then once we have enough participation, we'll generate an agency-specific report that includes the Y-VAL scores, so the scores per theme and per domain, areas where we could see some growth, and then resources and technical assistance for those areas of support. If you're interested in taking the tool, you can contact Josie, and if you're interested in learning more about the tool, you can contact us directly at info@youthmovenational.org. I will also add that go ahead, Brie.
I was just gonna mention, for some of you, I don't know the size of your parent centers, and so maybe you don't even have 15 employees, let alone having 15 young people organizing on a regular basis. So if you are one of those agencies that threw out the poll we're selecting a 1, like this is least developed. Another way that you would be able to utilize the tool is to help you develop your strategy to meaningfully engage young people in your programming. So maybe it's that first domain. You look at the assessment tool, you look at all of the things in domain 1 of commitment and vision, and say, how as an organization can we organize a group to start these conversations? And so I don't want you to say, well, my organization isn't here yet. I don't have 15 people. I can't do the tool. You can use the tool as a planning tool just by looking at what best practice is and then starting your conversations from there. If you have a small group, you might not be able to complete the survey with the survey link and get like a full score back, but it's at least a conversation starter on where might we raise the bar a little bit more. And so there's, from a quality improvement perspective of like, we're here, but we don't have these things written down, and maybe we should write them down. Or maybe not all of the decisions the young people are advising, they don't have the lived experience to really speak to that. So maybe we need to do some more outreach. So this is the formal assessment of your agency approach, but I strongly encourage you to reach back out to us to find some of the more technical assistance, like you're growing into this strategy and how we could be helpful for you. If this approach isn't going to work for you, if there's other ways that the tool can help guide you in your planning process. Sorry, Alice, I just wanted to add that piece in before we jumped to questions.
No, that's a great point. Thanks, Brie. And I do know that a lot of agencies and organizations have reached out to us to see the tool itself and try to incorporate all those best practices in their strategic planning, like you mentioned.
Okay, so I don't see any questions about the presentation, but this is Jessica. I actually do have one. So the Y-VAL is completely customizable to the needs of the center based on those 8 sections or guiding topics.
So that's a yes and question. No. There are parts. So for example, Youth Move National will customize the survey link so that if you are assessing multiple agencies at any given time, so I'll use the RAISE Center for example. Say the RAISE Center wanted all of its family centers to complete it. We would customize it for RAISE, but there at the very beginning is a drop-down box that gathers some demographic information about who is completing the tool. Are they adults? Are they youth? Are they a stakeholder? Who is completing the tool? What agency are they completing the tool for? So you self-select that. But in regards to the actual 8 engagement domains, these domains are not specific by no means to any specific service, system, or disability. So there is nothing within the assessment tool that specifically is talking about a mental health agency. So that it should be broad enough that there wouldn't necessarily be any changes for other entities to use it. So if a YMCA wanted to use the Y-VAL to see how well the YMCA is engaging young people in their youth programming, the tool should meet their need. So that's just kind of one piece. We have looked at, a lot of the elements to make sure that it would be appropriate for age groups. Our validation study went as low as the age of 12. The 12-year-olds were able to complete the tool. So again, based on agency implementation, Alice and I can support what adaptations might need to be available to support
Unmuted.
A variety of needs in an agency, but we can't change the questions per se within the study. If that makes
Great,
sense.
thank you. And we have 2 questions now. Larissa
Muted.
is asking, is your definition of agency a single provider versus a network of providers?
So that is a great question. Our current definition of agency is, for this tool, is a single provider, meaning that this entity has control over what happens within its four walls. That does not mean that you cannot utilize the tool with some of the customization that we just spoke about. So multiple agencies can complete it and get multiple scores. So we're currently working right now in the state of Colorado. Colorado's Division of Mental Health has a mental health treatment facility in each county. The state of Colorado has purchased the tool and is asking each one of the county level mental health agencies to complete the tool, and the county gets a report back of how everyone scored. So if you are a multi-site agency, that would be part of the customization. So we would make sure that we can look at the differences between one site and another site if they're both implementing youth programming. And then they would give you a better understanding of your organization. If you are talking about a governance body, a coalition, or a collaborative that brings together a multitude of provider agencies that is working on, say, a grant program collaboratively, and you want to assess how well in this very complex partnership with multiple agencies that are all responsible for a small piece of the big puzzle, we have another tool which is called the Y-VAL, which assesses specifically youth voice on councils and coalitions. And it takes away some of the domains, such as it shortens the tool from 8 domains to 5 domains. And it takes away some of the things that are very agency orientation-esque, I guess you could say. And that tool is currently being validated right now and will be available shortly.
Great. We have one more comment and then one more question. Lynn Kelt says, I like the tool and the definition of youth-driven or engagement at the beginning. So that's definitely the focus, youth-driven and collaborative and input. And then Caleb Campbell is asking, in terms of next steps that would be included in the report, what would an example of these next steps be? And I think that is in response to the question that I asked, because it came while you were answering the second question.
Okay. So for some organizations, next steps might be, as I mentioned before, perhaps they have a board of directors in their agency that has 2 young adults advising the board of directors. And perhaps the board of directors takes this tool and realizes that 2 young adults advising a very large organization is not a diverse enough perspective. A recommendation might be, have you considered starting a youth advisory council within your organization so that you can get broader youth participation within your work, and those 2 young adults bring that information back to your governance board. So there could be, it's hard to say without like seeing an agency scores because everything is so tailored. But for organizations that don't have, for example, maybe they score really low on a dedicated staff person for youth voice activities in that domain. A next step might be is maybe right now, this happen a lot, they utilize an intern to do youth engagement activities. Well, what happens with a student intern? They're never around during spring break, they're never around during Christmas break, and they're never around during summer break. So those are the times young people are most available. So maybe your current strategy, yes, it helps you out as an organization because it might be free labor, but it's not actually accessible for young people for the long term. The other thing is that young people build relationships with these staff folks. So when it's constantly changing every academic year because a new intern is coming in, that's disruption of the relationship and the engagement strategy, like starting all over again. So when we complete the assessment tool, if maybe that score is like, well, we have a person, but it's not like a staff person, we would make a recommendation of like, have you considered these other aspects? And so it all varies in each domain. There's nothing within this assessment tool that we have not seen successfully implemented at a youth development agency. Like the validation was looking at tools completely outside of system advocacy tools. And so we have a lot of lessons learned and like concrete examples of like it is possible. There are ways to enhance the work.
Great. Well, those were good questions and really thorough, good answers. I believe that's the last question. So I guess we'll go to the last pages.
Okay, this is Josie. So thank you, Brie and Alice, and Youth Move in general for jumping on and sharing really fantastic information. As Brie mentioned, you know, of course we feel that this tool is fantastic, the Y-VAL, but as she also mentioned, all of these key dimensions of youth engagement are vital to start thinking about. Where are you in the policies? Where are you in staff engagement? And I feel like a lot of organizations I've worked with, they're like, oh, we have a young adult who is on our board, we're good to go. And that is a step in all of this, but we also really hope that you start to think about, wait, how could a young adult be involved with writing bylaws or production materials or leading trainings or anything else, and not feeling that it's just a checkbox. When we engage individuals that we're serving and help them to lead these services, I believe that everyone benefits. So I really appreciate Youth Move jumping on, talking about this work. And as you can see, this is their website and their email addresses. I really encourage you to reach out to them. When I had conversation with both of them, I just was really fired up about the importance of youth engagement. So I really encourage anyone who's interested to email them.
And please check out our website. If you liked our definition of youth-driven care, some of the other engagement strategies, our website is rich of additional information that can help you aside from just sending you to the Y-VAL portion of our website. And so we're able to be supportive, and as well as if you are in a state that we have a current Youth Move chapter, we'd be more than happy to connect you to already existing youth leadership programming that is local to you that operates under our Youth Move network. So lots of options to support you all.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies, for speaking. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe if you're in a snow zone. And thanks for joining. Until the next webinar, have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray.
Bye.